Greek or Egyptian?
The history of Ptolemaic Egypt is a fascinating blend of Greek and Egyptian cultures established by Ptolemy Isoter, a general of Alexander the Great. The Ptolemaic dynasty ruled Egypt from 305 BC to 30 BC. During this period, the ruling elite, including the pharaohs, were of Greek descent and spoke Greek, but they also adopted many aspects of Egyptian culture and religion. This unique fusion of Greek and Egyptian influences resulted in a distinct society that was both Greek and Egyptian, with Greek being the dominant culture. However, it is important to note that the majority of the population in Ptolemaic Egypt was Egyptian, and they continued to practice their own traditions and beliefs alongside the Greek influence. Overall, Ptolemaic Egypt can be considered a hybrid culture, blending elements of both Greek and Egyptian civilizations. 332 BC Alexander the Great conquers Egypt in 332 BCE. Alexander the Great successfully conquered Egypt and established his own rule. This marked the beginning of a new era in Egyptian history, known as the Ptolemaic period. Despite being ruled by a Greek dynasty, Egypt remained distinctively Egyptian in many aspects, including language, religion, and culture. 305 BCE Ptolemy I becomes the first Ptolemaic ruler of Egypt in 305 BCE. Ptolemy I, one of Alexander the Great's generals, declared himself the ruler of Egypt and established the Ptolemaic dynasty. Ptolemy and his successors adopted the title of pharaoh and assimilated into Egyptian society. They also embraced many Egyptian traditions and customs to gain the support and acceptance of the local population. 305 BCE 30 BC Ptolemaic period. The Ptolemaic period in Egypt lasted for nearly 3 centuries, from 305 BC to 30 BC. During this time, Egypt experienced a blend of Greek and Egyptian influences. Greek became the language of the ruling elite, while the majority of the population continued to speak Egyptian. The Ptolemies introduced Greek administrative systems and institutions, but they also maintained and respected Egyptian religious practices and traditions. 30 BC Roman conquest of Egypt. In 30 BCE, Egypt fell under Roman control after the defeat of Cleopatra via Mark Antony by Octavian, later known as Augustus. With the Roman conquest, the Ptolemaic period came to an end, and Egypt became a province of the Roman Empire. The Roman influence gradually replaced the Greek influence, and the Egyptians became more integrated into the larger Roman culture. At the high end of the social scale, though, Greeks monopolized positions of power in the government, military, and commerce. You don't see a lot of native Egyptians acting as generals, as royal ministers, or aristocrats. Alexandria was a Greek city, essentially a segregated one with distinct quarters for Greeks, Egyptians, and Jews. It was organized like a traditional Greek city, which meant restrictive citizenship, so that the Egyptian and Jewish segments of the population were largely excluded from city government and high social status. Important cities tended to follow Alexandria's example in miniature. Despite that exclusionary policy in the cities, the Ptolemies did make a big point of patronizing Egyptian temples and the priestly hierarchy there, as some reason to see the Ptolemaic Egyptian priesthood as the continuation of what was left of the native aristocracy. The temples were big and powerful, and arguably had more impact on the average Egyptian than the goings-on inside the Greek cities. In less exalted stations, intermarriage was common. It's quite common to find records of families where one brother has an Egyptian name and another brother a Greek name. Mid-level bureaucrats and small-time officials, and after the first few generations soldiers, show a mix of Greek and Egyptian names. At the very bottom of the social pyramid were the peasantry, who were pretty much all native Egyptians. Ptolemaic Egypt was a highly regulated plantation state. Personal and social mobility were strictly limited. You needed official permission to leave your home district, and a good deal of effort was expended on keeping people where the government thought they belonged. The combination of an agricultural, pre-modern society and an ancient version of the Chinese hukou system kept the countryside very homogeneous. On a cultural level, Egypt was equally complicated. The Ptolemies supported the native religion. They were particularly fond of the Egyptian tradition of theocratic king worship, which they adopted following Alexander's example. since the Persians had been very unfriendly towards the native tradition. This stance earned the Ptolemies a lot of goodwill. The Ptolemies also encouraged syncretism, the cross-pollination of Egyptian and Greek religious ideas. New cults like that of Serapis seemed like a good way to bring Greek and Egyptian subjects together. Throughout the Ptolemaic period, debate over Greek or Egyptian identity. Throughout the Ptolemaic period, there was an ongoing debate about the identity of Ptolemaic Egypt. While the ruling dynasty was of Greek origin, the majority of the population was Egyptian. The Ptolemies adopted many Egyptian customs and presented themselves as legitimate pharaohs, but they also maintained Greek traditions and cultural practices. The dual identity of Ptolemaic Egypt made it a unique blend of Greek and Egyptian elements, and it is often considered a hybrid culture.
Thank you for watching, and I hope you have an enjoyable time. I'm delighted for you to follow us to see more mysterious and intriguing events.